basically I turned straight into an aerial. So the aerial was behind me and I turned straight into it, and the aerial basically penetrated through my eyelid and into my eye. So it ripped my eyelid off my face and like popped my eyeball. Not knowing this at the time, I just thought I'd sort of scraped my face. So I sort of stood up straight away and shouted to my friend and said, look, I can't see. And I saw that he was pale as a ghost straight away. So at that point I knew that it wasn't good.
Elliott came to me when he was seriously injured whilst working on board a ship. Elliott was an aircraft engineer in the Navy. Elliott was involved with landing an aircraft onto a ship. Whilst doing so, as part of his job role, unfortunately, Elliott's eye made contact with an antennae on the helicopter, causing a significant and penetrating laceration to Elliott's eye. Really sadly, as a result of this injury, Elliott lost his eye. When I first met Elliott, it was clear that he was struggling. He was about 18 months post-injury, but unfortunately, the damaged eye was still in his socket and he was suffering really badly with pain, migraines, issues with blurred vision in his other good eye. And so it was clear to me that Elliott was in a difficult place. One of the main things when I first spoke to Elliott was that it was clear that what he really needed was some access to treatment and rehabilitation. It was so obvious that the damaged eye was giving him a lot of problems, and his first priority was to get that sorted. I was also a little concerned that he was at work, and I was worried that that wasn't necessarily the right place for him. And so the first things I wanted to sort for him was treatment and making sure that Elliott was in a safe environment on a day-to-day basis. I was really struck by how vulnerable he was in that moment in his life. And it felt like, although Elliott had people and a support network around him, that had slightly failed him, and he needed almost, I would say, a safety net, just to make sure that he was getting the right treatment, rehabilitation, and also that he was in an environment that would enable him to rest and recuperate properly so that he could get back to being the best version of himself. So I think for me, one of the main things that really stood out for me is that in our role as lawyers, we're there to try and seek compensation, but there's lots of things that come alongside that, such as assisting with treatment and rehabilitation and making sure that the client's needs are met in a very holistic way. And I felt like when I met Elliott, that was something that I could really help him with. Elliott's accident was entirely avoidable, and that means that there's lessons to be learned from that. In terms of military aviation, there's loads of strict standards in place about what needs to happen and what lessons can be learned. I mentioned previously that Elliott's eye made contact with an antennae. Now, these antennae are usually covered or can be covered with a foam blank. These blanks are easily accessible and inexpensive, but for whatever reason were not previously utilised. As a result of Elliott's accident, these foam blanks are now routinely used on these types of helicopters, but it is sad to note that his accident could have been entirely avoided if they had been in use prior to his accident. I think that this case highlights the need to make sure that health and safety standards are maintained even in military environments. And it's a little lesson about how accidents can be entirely avoidable. And with that in mind, I think it's really important that Elliott sought some legal assistance, because not only did it mean that he got access to the correct treatment and rehab that he needed, it also meant that internal procedures within the Royal Navy were changed, and I think that's incredibly important.
I had a conversation with Natasha, and obviously she told me how she could help me and stuff, and she asked me, you know, were the Navy doing this, were they doing that, things like that, and effectively they weren't doing anything. I wasn't aware of any of this either. I think she was brilliant all the way through. Communication was brilliant. She got the settlement I believe I sort of deserved out of the case. I got the exact outcome that I deserved and wanted, and my life now is in a lot better place. I think massively to do with Natasha and how she's helped.
The one thing that was a privilege to watch and assist with is being a part of Elliott's journey. So when he first came to me, it was clear that he was struggling and he felt very alone. And throughout the process of getting to know Elliott and his family and his friends and his support network, it was clear that Slater and Gordon were able to assist him, not just with compensation, but with access to treatment, rehabilitation, to cover both his physical and mental well-being. And throughout that journey, I watched Elliott go from someone who was struggling quite significantly to someone who realised what he could do with his life post-injury. It was an absolute privilege and a pleasure to watch him develop and grow and learn and come to terms with his injury, but also to carry on living again and making the most out of the experiences that came his way. And for me, that was one of the most important things to watch over time. And whilst I know that I can never put someone back in the position that they were in before they were injured, I like to think that we can do everything that we possibly can to put them in the best position post-injury. If you've experienced any type of workplace injury, accident or illness during your time in the armed forces, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me to see if there's any way that me and Slater and Gordon can assist.